What's up and welcome back to another synth video. My name is Devin Belanger and today I'm doing a video that many of you have asked me my opinion on over the years. Prophet versus Oberheim. Namely, the Prophet 5/10 versus the mighty OB-X8. I can't wait to dive in today and show you hopefully the personality of these two synths and figure out which one might be right for you. But firstly, if you are gonna pick up one of these two synths or something else for your studio, please consider using my Perfect Circuit affiliate link. It costs nothing extra for you. It's in the description and it really does help me keep making these videos. Also, if you already have one of these two synths and you want some new patches, please check out my Miles Away custom synth packs in the link below as well. Without further ado, let's dive on in. All right, well, here we are on the beautiful front panels of both the Prophet 10 and the OB-X8. Now, let me just get this out of the way before we dive in. You cannot go wrong with either of these synthesizers. These are the top of the top, the creme de la creme. Let's start off with some patch to patch comparisons so you can get an idea of which one excels at what kind of sounds and how close they can get. First up, we have this PWM style patch that's famous on the Prophet 10, Prophet 5. What an absolutely glorious sound. Now, this is done by the polymod section on the Prophets, and namely basically making the LFO go faster, in this case oscillator 2, oscillator B. It goes faster as we go up the keyboard with keyboard tracking. So it just has this beautiful, lively, organic sound that I think is just timeless. This is a classic patch. And the envelopes are really, really snappy, but don't really come across as harsh or clicky. Everything's just perfectly tuned. So can we do the same thing on the OB-X8? Well, I have programmed something to see if I can get as close as possible. We'll go back and forth. Well, as you can hear, while they are very similar, they are totally different sonically. Like, we can get them very close, and yeah, arguably you could even get it closer with a bit more programming. But why I wanted to start off with this patch is to show you just how different the inherent character of these synths are. Namely, the Prophet is all about this warm, almost woody, mid-range forward sound. But it gets away with that and doesn't come across as muddy or overly dark because the envelopes are so snappy. This is a soft brass sound, and don't pay attention to the knobs. This is not where they actually are. Like, we can even mess around with this, right? So you can tell they're not right at 0. There's no clicking, there's no fancy tricks. There's just a really, really snappy, kind of like lively electric sound to these envelopes. And then when paired with the absolute wildness and natural sound of the mid-range forward kind of woody tone, you get this lovely sort of mid-range forward, organic, yet still punches through and cuts into a mixed sound. In contrast, on the OB-X8, you have a very, very different style of sound. You have, again, we're getting this as close as I could get it at least, but always remember, you know, a different programmer could probably get it even closer. So right off the bat, you know, we're trying to emulate this style of sound, but that's not really the natural character of the OB-X8. I'm using the 4-pole filter, but most people would hear Oberheim's and they would think of the 2-pole SEM filter. So let's switch to that. This synth is inherently, if this is dark and warm and woody, this is inherently bright and electric and emotional and charged. So we have almost maybe a little bit more of a, I don't want to say sloppy envelope sound, but a little bit less precise and snappy than the Prophet, but this is paired with a much brighter overall sound, which really gives it this feeling of sort of soaring above your sound. Even in the lower notes, we get this lovely deep bass, but it doesn't really feel like it's super mid-range heavy. It's more sort of bass and high frequencies, whereas here, for my ears at least, I hear more bass, of course, but also mid-range and a lot less high-end. Even if we bring this up, right? Let's reset this. So we're gonna stay on the 4-pole filter to keep this a little bit closer, but overall, I just wanna start off with the sound so you can hear really dark and mid-range forward, bright and exciting and very spacious and floats above. Now, before we spend too much time just kind of playing around on this patch, because it is, I will confess, one of my all-time favorite synth patches, I think it's a good place to show kind of the different workflows and the different features that one of them are missing versus the other. So I mentioned the polymod section. The OB-X8 doesn't really have much of a polymod section. You can do triangle cross mod, but you can't slow the oscillator 2 down into below audio rates. You can do this like fixed X mod thing, which is really only useful for metallic sounds, whereas on this synth, you get this absolutely wonderful polymod section. It is truly phenomenal. But the trade-off of that is that you only get one LFO, and if you want to do more complex modulation, you're going to have to give up oscillator 2 and use this polymod section, right? Whereas on the OB-X8, you don't get really as much polymod, cross mod, but you do get it, like I mentioned, it's there. But the trade-off is that we get a much better LFO section. We get 2 buses for our 1 LFO. You can send to different things, so if I want to do like a little bit of vibrato, send it to the filter. We can do all sorts of cool things in the page 2 settings. Most importantly, what I'm using here is keyboard tracking. So I'm trying to emulate the polymod keyboard tracking with keyboard tracking the LFO. Because there's 2 LFOs in here because we can split this binaurally, which we'll look at later. And then, if that isn't enough, we actually have a full secondary LFO down here, right? So you can't really see it in the shot, but here I'll bring it in. Right, and we already touched on it, but the filter, we're trying to emulate the Prophet, warm low pass filter. But we have so many more filter types, right? We have our, SEM filter we looked at. Let's maybe make this a little bit less intense. I was just doing it for, we've got our Curtis filter, very nice for this type of sound, 2-pole, our 4-pole one, which we were looking at, a lot of bass dropout, and then other than that, our hidden filter types, we've got a high pass filter, for that Boards of Canada sound, band pass, Probably the nicest sounding bandpass filter I've heard on a synth. Same with the notch, it's lovely. Notch filter is like the Oberheim sound as far as vintage synths go. Not a lot of other synths back then had a notch filter. Like, there's no way you can do this sound on this anymore, right? We can go to our Rev 1 filter or Rev 2 filter. We can do some, resonance compensation if we want to compensate. Or not compensate. But we're not getting anywhere near this. Let's modulate that, right? Right? And we've only been hearing the synths in mono. Which the Prophet 10 can only do mono, but the OB-X8 is fully stereo, which is just glorious. We can change the width. Let's do a quarter. Right? And just like that, we have gone and shown just how absolutely different these two synths sound. So next up, I have this like analog strings pad. And the reason why I want to showcase this is because before I feel like we were kind of in the Prophet's element with that PWM keyboard sound, whereas the low string sound is one of the all-time classic Oberheim sounds. Is that not just perfect? So nice, right? And the Prophet just fundamentally cannot do this sound exactly alike. I tried and programmed with a bunch of different tricks, which we'll look at, and this is about as close as I got, the sound you just heard earlier. Now for me, this is just, not that it's a full competition, but this is a sound that if you like that classic synth string sound, this might be a little bit more unique. I haven't heard this on as many records, but this sound is just true classic Oberheim. And if you like this sound, you got to go for the Oberheim, right? What makes this sound so unique? Before we looked at something that the Prophet did that was really unique, at least for the time, with the polymod doing keyboard tracked pulse width modulation. This is so unique, at least again for the time, because this utilizes that beautiful SEM filter. Inherently, a two-pole filter is going to let in more harmonics, let in more overtones, and sound more like strings, right? Whereas this, I'm trying to fake it a little bit by, doing a little bit more modulation with a little bit of noise mod and stuff. But it's just an inherently darker filter. Don't get me wrong, that is a phenomenal patch, but This is just so classic. And the other thing that this is doing is it's utilizing that mod matrix that I told you about that involves sending different things at different amounts. So we're sending a little bit of detune and a lot of pulse width modulation, whereas this, our LFO, we pretty much have to decide how much we're sending it to with this mount here or the mod wheel, and we just have to pick with one, right? So the way that I was able to get a little bit closer with this, and if you do like that more sort of, modulation heavy sound, but you don't want to sacrifice the thickness of losing your oscillator, that's where one of my favorite features of the Prophet 10 comes in, which is the unison, poly-unison mode. So if we take this off, and I actually think they should just add this to the OB-X8 as a firmware update. If they have already and I've missed it, let me know. But absolutely, I did not think I'd be using this as much, and I'm totally addicted to it, which means, get the Prophet 10. If you're looking at the Prophet 5 or the Prophet 10, my humble opinion, you got to go for the Prophet 10, because what poly unison does, if we hear this patch without it on, and then we turn on poly unison, we basically go and we choose our voices. If we were in regular unison, we're only playing one note, but if we go all the way to the end, poly unison, now we've split our voices in half, so we have a Prophet 5 basically, but it's duplicated everything. So our oscillator A no longer stands on its own, and oscillator B is no longer a single modulator. We have 5 voices and then everything doubled. So that's how we're able to get these beautiful right? Without it, with it. Absolutely glorious sound, and it is truly an ingenious way to get around the limitation of polymod where you lose your second oscillator without making it some sort of complicated split and layer feature. So the OB-X8 can't do that, but what it can do, which is pretty amazing, is go into binaural mode. So if we tap this double button, let's scroll to our strings preset, which if you're looking for it, it's in the OB-X bank. I didn't even make this one from scratch. It's perfect as is. I'll just turn up some release. We now have a fully binaural version of that classic Oberheim patch. Right? Totally different sound with the binaural on. Now, just like we lost half our voices with the Prophet, we lost half our voices with the OB, and that is where I am gonna say voice count matters on a synth like this, and it's really a shame that they didn't make like an OB-16 the same way that they made the Prophet 5 and Prophet 10, because as soon as you start playing things with this double patch, like let's go to just another, random brass ensemble. Turn the release way up. Turn on some LFO on one of them. Turn on some filter LFO. Right, I'm just getting distracted. This is just majestic. As soon as you start using that, it's impossible to go back to this, right? Like, this is still great. Where's my OB patch? Yeah. It's great, don't get me wrong, but it's not this. And you might not think it, but 4 versus 5 voices is a huge breakpoint. For me personally, and I'm not a trained keyboard player, but I love to do an octave in the bass, and then 3-note chords that usually have like a leading melody, right? Like something like, let's do something nice here. that just works on 5 voices. Like, I really do think Dave Smith is a genius, first and foremost, RIP. But secondly, back when he designed the Prophet 5, he knew that 5 voices, while a limitation, was enough for people to play on. And I truly feel, not to rain on people's parade, let me know in the comments if you agree, 4 voices just like isn't quite enough. Like, right, look at that. I lost it there. It's a bit frustrating, like when you come from playing the Prophet 10 in polyunison mode and then you go to the OB-X8 and you're like, oh man, it really does feel like there's a crazy breakpoint between 4 and 5 voices. I know there's people who literally go and buy like a second OB-X8 module. Shout out, that's awesome, that's epic. So you can have the full glorious 8 voices of binaural. But then that's a whole lot more expensive than just upgrading from like a Prophet 5 to 10. So keep that in mind. Let's move on to another patch here. So the next patch that I'm going to look at, and then we'll kind of just go and design a patch from scratch, is going to be this sound. Very boring sound on its own, but it's a bass. And it's a kind of bass that is deceivingly important, because the fact that this is literally just, I could probably remake it right now. It's a single saw wave with a bit of resonance and a bit of envelope, and 3 unison to match the glorious mini Moog's 3 oscillators. It's basically just like a Moog style bass, right? Right? And why I wanted to show this sound starting on the Prophet is that the Prophet just has this like snarl to it, man. It's got this snarl that really, the only other synth for bass that I have that has this snarl is the Moog Sub 37. Not even the Matriarch really has this snarl, sorry. I know they have the CP33 mixer on it, but I find that there's just something about the balance of it just works, man. The bass on this synth is absolutely killer. And I'm gonna go to the OB-X8 here. There we go. We're in binaural mode right now. Let's take it off binaural. Let's see here. We go to our area. It doesn't have the snarl, man. Even with the fancy tricks of the binaural being able to go in stereo, I will 100% say with confidence that if you like bass, the basses, for my taste at least, are significantly fatter and better on the Prophet 10 than on the OB-X8. And I'm totally shocked at how much I love the bass on the Prophet compared to the Oberheim. And I've tested this on other sounds. It's the same every time. Bass, if you like bass and you're only getting one synth, Prophet over Oberheim. That's my opinion. Let me know in the comments. Let's go ahead now and transition to doing a sound from scratch, and we'll see where we go, kind of where each sound takes us, where each synth wants to take us. All right, so we're going to start off by initializing a preset here. We'll turn on keyboard tracking so it's nice and bright. And I'm not going to do like a full comparison on each one here because there's already great videos on that, but just listen. Even trying to make it as bright as we possibly can. This synth is just inherently darker. Okay, cool. We got that out of the way again with proof. I'm gonna go ahead and design some fun stuff here. So I will start off by changing it to the Rev 1-2 filter. Let's bring in a square wave. Let's throw some PWM on the LFO here. Let's go ahead and do some oscillator FM here on the filter. That's beautiful. I wish there was a reverse sawtooth. I don't know why there isn't. That would have been a great addition if you could just like hold it and it would change green or something, because the ramp up is less useful, but small price to pay. Let's bring in that beautiful Paul unison mode. I can't get enough of that. Turn on some vintage mode. Maybe throw like half keyboard track on. No, I like it with full. Let's use the envelope, throw some velocity on there, make like a little pluck sound to bring out this warm sound and make it not so mid-range focused. Listen to that clicky envelope in the best way. Like we can make it not clicky easily. Such a random thing to be raving about, but this has my favorite envelopes on any synth. They just like, they sound right. I can't even decide what I want to do with this sound because everything I do sounds good. Let's throw it into some FM here instead. Let's get it out of low frequency mode. Do some noise mod. Bring it up an octave, bring it down an octave. So fast, right? come on, it's so nice. I haven't even been using many of the features, including Aftertouch or some of the other modulation options on the wheel mod and poly mod. And this thing is just so organic, and it's what you see is what you get. All right, now let's do the same thing on the OB-X8. And apologies for the weird camera angle. This thing is seriously so massive. It's so hard to get it in frame, especially with a synth on top of it. But we've got our initialized preset, same thing. And you'll notice right off the bat, I would say maybe it's just my unit, but the oscillators are a little bit less wild than on the Prophet. On the Prophet, I rarely find myself needing to add vintage mode unless I want to really make something sound vintage. Whereas the Oberheim, one of the things I'll always do is start off by bringing in the vintage mode. And I have to say that the sound of the oscillators, just how bright yet powerful and wild and full they are. And I understand that's probably more so the filters than the oscillators, but the sound of just an oscillator, a single sawtooth going through a SEM filter. Bringing a little bit of resonance here, bringing some release. Oberheim is the sound of nostalgia to me, and I absolutely love it. Even though my personal taste gravitates slightly more towards the OB-6, go watch my full Oberheim comparison. This is just still probably the single nicest sounding Oberheim, at least from the modern ones, in terms of pure oscillator sound, the purity of that sweet vintage nostalgia, and we're only using one oscillator. So how I would design a sound if I was working on this, it's all about that detune, that two oscillator massive sound. Let's hit that. So we bring in oscillator 2, go down an octave. I absolutely love how you can really just like go crazy with the detune on this thing. You can almost not detune it too much, like even something ridiculous like that. Still usable. But then right about there is a sweet spot. Let's bring in the envelope. We'll try something like we did on the Prophet, but I tend to like the more kind of brassy style envelopes. Don't get me wrong, I absolutely love the envelopes on the OB-X8 as well. In fact, we actually have two types of envelope here, if I can find it in page 2. But I don't know what it is, there's just something like, I just don't have to mess around with them at all, and I get the exact shape of sound with the envelopes on the Prophet. Let's go ahead and we're using the OB-X envelope and LFO shape right now. Add some velocity in there. Oh my gosh. I mean, it's the best sounding filter ever. Come on, right? The SEM? Like, we can play around with some of the other ones. Like, let's try the Curtis. Very nice too. We got the four pole. I really think the enhanced 4-pole with more modified 4-pole with more bass compensation is really nice. But the SEM, it's the best, come on. The resonance is the most musical. We have maxed out resonance. I don't know if you can see that on camera. Maxed out resonance, and it sounds just incredible, not harsh at all. We'll do that. Let's go ahead and make these triangles for a second. Triangles with notches is really nice. Let's go ahead and detune one of these. Do some of the fancy page 2 stuff here. I don't even know if you can see it, to be honest. Keyboard tracking here, delay, LFO delay. Where's my LFO delay? Let's see, mod 2 delay time. Let's do that. Yeah, mod 2 delay time and attack time. And then we will make these things square waves. So it's delayed, right? Really cool feature. It's hidden in this annoying page 2 area. There are like shortcuts and stuff. Like for example, I'm gonna, basically make, this guy go like this, quantize it, invert it. I'll turn off quantize and like that. Yeah, mod 2 envelope to LFO speed, right? So we can do some fancy stuff. But I'm not a huge fan of the page 2 settings compared to the intuitive workflow of the Prophet 10. That's no screens or anything like that besides the numeric display. Page 2 is kind of annoying, but the trade-off is you get so much more power. Even just the fact that we get like, what is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or 7 different filters on this thing. Absolutely beautiful, right? And then let's go ahead. We're gonna save this here. We'll save it onto program 8, hit binaural. We'll scroll to my area here. What is this? Program 8. And then just like that, I'm gonna turn this down so it doesn't destroy my ears. Use our second LFO. We have it. All right, well, that's where I'm gonna leave things today. Hopefully, if you're still with me, you have a good idea of really just how different these two synths are. But I figured I'd wrap up with a just short overview of what the pros and cons for each are, and finally, my recommendation for which one I think you should get. So right off the bat, which one sounds better? That's super subjective. I think for me personally, I slightly prefer the sound of the Prophet for like basses, warm pads, warm chords, anything that you want to punch and kind of feel deep in your chest. It really has this emotional mid-range that is beautiful and really sounds better, frankly, than pretty much every other synth in terms of the mid-range that I've heard. But for the Oberheim OB-X8, I'm always shocked at how much I prefer it on those big, brassy, exciting sounds and how nostalgic it sounds. I think my music as miles away is so nostalgia focused, and Oberheim it hits that sound so well. In terms of workflow, this is the easiest thing in the entire world. The Prophet 10 wins hands down in terms of workflow. It's just so easy to use. And I think after reflecting more, the workflow really might be why I tend to still use my OB-6, probably more than my OB-X8. I do think, unfortunately, it was a bit of a miss to have so many of the best settings hidden behind the page 2 system. It's not the most intuitive, it's hard to remember, and it takes a while scrolling through the LCD screen, and the Prophet doesn't have any of that. Yes, it's a much simpler synth, but it's just a much more enjoyable synth to use. So if workflow is important to you and you're sick of staring at screens, Prophet 10 all the way. How about in terms of features? Again, just like the Prophet won this last round easily, this is the easiest win for the OB-X8 in history. It has way more features, it has way more of a timbral variety because of all the different filters. That SEM notch filter alone is so unique, and the Prophet can't do anything close to that. And the fact that it has a full stereo path, the Prophet is only mono, you can play it in binaural. I didn't even get into the different splits, but I almost never use splits and layers in the Prophet 10 because it's mono, so you're never gonna be really like recording a bass and a lead on the same mono track. That's kind of weird. Whereas the Oberheim, you've got the ability to literally go like left out, left, right out, or you can kind of like split the keyboard and have a really wide sound on top and a mono sound below. It's just much more versatile. And I think that if you're looking for a more all-in-one, like end-all be-all polysynth, and you want that sound, unless you're really looking for something with limitations, then the OB-X8 probably wins in this category. But at the same time, it's also not going to be as fully featured as something like the Super Gemini behind me or a Third Wave. So are you really buying one of these synths for all the features? That's a good question. So we've done the 3 categories. In conclusion, which of these synths is better? Which one do I prefer? Well, they're really, really close neck and neck, but I think I prefer the Prophet 10 overall, although I would recommend if you're only gonna buy one big flagship synth, which let's face it, most of us are lucky to even have one of these. I feel very blessed to be able to do this for a living and have both. If you are just gonna buy one, I still think the OB-X8 is probably a better value and will go further because of the fact you get those different filter types. You can do those 2-pole sounds like the strings that I showed you, but the Prophet 10, it's just more enjoyable to use. So really, I think it should come down to this. Which one do you like the sound of better? Do you like that kind of like warm, organic, woody, mid-ranged forward sound? Or do you like the bright, electric, nostalgic, wide sound of the Oberheim? That's the most important thing. Go for which one sounds better, but then almost as important, go for whether or not you're going for more of a hands-on, intuitive workflow, Prophet, or more features, more of an end-all, be-all analog polysynth that can really do most sounds really well, Oberheim. Let me know what you think. I've been talking long enough. I might be losing my voice here. And if you did enjoy this video, please remember to like and subscribe, and I will see you next week with another synth video.